Hello, folks. Scott Guile from Macmillan. It is officially 2 o'clock, so I am going to go ahead and begin. We are recording this. We will be sharing the recording out after the fact. We appreciate your time and your interest today. We are going to talk about effective use of digital resources with Professor Ben White from Bladen College. If you are still looking to call in, this is the information on the call-in. I'll let it linger here for a moment if you want to write it down. You should have gotten an email with this information. I believe Ben is going to briefly share it at the beginning as well. So again, thank you. Benjamin White is a professor at Bladen College. He's a faculty fellow in the Center of Teaching and Learning, and he regularly delivers professional development talks and workshops on various aspects of pedagogy, teaching, learning, and he has been using digital resources for 7+ years. He is also a member of the Launchpad Macmillan community, which means he is one of the instructors that works with us to help train other instructors and advise other instructors in the ways to effectively use digital resources. Now, this next slide is probably going to be a little bit of a surprise to Ben, but on the concept that it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission, I went ahead and I looked at Rate My Professor. See, what do students think of Professor White? And they were about, and I look at these all the time, a little peek behind the curtain. I usually look at this stuff for most of the people I talk to, just out of curiosity. About the best ratings I've ever seen. He had a 4.8 out of 5. And he had a chili pepper or 2 too, if that matters. But this is the kind of stuff that his students are saying. Really, really positive feedback, really passionate teacher, really good teacher. Students are learning and students are enjoying his class. And that is the kind of person that we want to have in the role of a community member and also obviously as a presenter today. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball to Professor White. Ben, go ahead and share your screen. Thank you very much. I'm going to go on mute. Again, please chat us with any questions. We will be answering.
Thank you for the intro, Scott. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Thank you for attending this webinar. I hope there'll be.
You do need to share your screen, though, Ben. Sorry.
Here's my screen. There we go.
Where to go?
Oops. All right. Thank you for attending the webinar. I hope I get such amazing reviews from faculty members and not only students. That was a surprise to me. But thanks for putting that up there, Scott. That was really neat. If you have them in questions, I know Scott mentioned this before, please ask them in chat, and I'm happy to address them, or a Macmillan person will get back to you. I do want to make sure all your questions do get addressed. Following the webinar, there will be a question and answer section. If your question doesn't get answered or you'd like more detail on my best practices or want to talk with me further, I'm more than happy to set up a one-on-one conversation and we can share some ideas. So many of you are using Launchpad or similar products, Cengage, Pearson. They all have something similar to this. The intent of this webinar is, first of all, I use Launchpad, but the intent of this webinar is not to necessarily promote Launchpad, but the types of digital resources that hopefully you all have access to in your different disciplines and different courses. What I want to do here today is help you think about using resources a little bit differently so to better assist you and your students this semester and hopefully semesters to come. So why do we use digital resources? There's a whole bunch of standard reasons. You might be using them now. You might be considering digital resource use. It does help provide additional resources to the students. It does cut down grading time for instructors with auto-graded assignments. It also provides formative assessment and immediate feedback for students. They can see how they're doing. They have less concern about their grades throughout the semester because they know how they're doing and they get feedback right away. Ebook tends to cost less than a printed text. Not all of our students have a lot of money. Most of them don't. It's a great way to easy entry into getting access to the text. And It has the ability to, with deep integration, to integrate with your institution's LMS system and gradebook so that you can keep all your grades in one place. Now, why do I use Launchpad and why am I such a big advocate for digital resources? Well, all the reasons above, they're fantastic reasons. But in addition, in Launchpad, I use learning curve quizzes, which are adaptive quizzes. They're completion grades. And I use them to help prepare my students for class. I used to think, well, why aren't my students reading? Why aren't they preparing themselves for class? And then I realized that's not something my students aren't doing. I am not teaching them to do this in the best way. So by giving them these quizzes, they're reviewing material before they ever set foot in the classroom. It gives me actionable data. I can see how my students are doing at each step of the way, and it gives me the chance to modify my lectures and also meet with my students one-on-one and help develop individualized study plans for them using these resources. Oh, there's my study plan. The other thing I like to think about doing with digital resources is using it to teach students better study skills. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as we break things up and actually selling the idea of digital resource to them as a way to help them study as opposed to just busy work or ways to earn points in the class. The way I think about it, I want to use these digital resources to create a behavioral change in my students. I don't just want to change the way they study for my class. I want to show them how they can study for all of their classes, whether their professors use digital resources or not. I like to think of this as a three-part system. I start by giving them an adaptive quiz, a learning curve quiz. That gives me an overview, that gives them an overview of the chapter, so when they come into class, they know the sorts of things we're going to be discussing. We then have our class session, lecture, seminar, you can do activities, and then when they go home, they also have assessments in Launchpad. They've got homework assignments, so that keeps them engaged with the material throughout the learning process. I also like to space my assignments out. I know some professors think, well, let's have everything due at the end because that's when I'm going to look at the grades. But spacing assignments out can provide a lot of benefit to students. As we know from the literature in memory, my area is psychology, it provides better retention of the material when we learn things in small chunks spaced out over time. It also promotes better time management skills. I'm teaching my students, in essence, to go in and spend 20 or 30 minutes a day or every other day on my class in order to earn points. They get used to this regular practice of budgeting this amount of time and spending it in my class with the idea that I can help them generalize this to their other courses as well. It also helps students set up good study habits. They're thinking about engaging with the material on a regular basis and going back and reviewing their progress. One of the big messages I have for you today is simply assigning activities in your, with digital resources. It's not enough to just assign them and let students do them. It's very important that you also explain why you assign these assignments for the students. What I tell my students is I tell them it gives me data, and that data helps me better plan my class time and content. I can see what areas you're struggling with, and I can engineer my lecture to help you out so that we use our time effectively and efficiently. I also tell them that it gives them data. It will tell them what they know and what they don't know. They no longer have to wait to take an exam to see if they've actually gotten the material and mastered it. They can use these assessments as they go to determine whether or not they need more work. And then I always welcome them to read more, to come see me, office hours, ask questions, go find resources online, whatever they need to do to help them master the material. It also, we also bring in the testing effect, and the testing effect is a psychological principle which says if we practice the way we're going to test, then our retention will be better. If, when they're engaging with these digital resources, they see the same types of questions and the same types of wording as going to be on the test, then when they get to the test is not a huge surprise in terms of how the questions are being asked. They've actually already practiced this. And if you tell them this is what is going on, they tend to pay more attention to the questions, and they start working on their ability to decode that question before they even get to a testing environment. I feel like this is, in order to give students ownership of the learning process, we've got to explain the relevance of each and every assignment, each and every assessment to the students, so it's not treated as busy work. There's an actual purpose behind it. So why would you even bother explaining why to your students? Well, first off, we like knowing when we need to do something and why we need to do it. If we make the assignments part of studying, they're not just busy work. I tell my students, when you do this homework, when you slow down, you concentrate, you pay attention, do it well, write down any questions you have, that's studying. That's your study time. You don't need to spend additional time studying if you do the work. I would love if they spend additional time studying, but if I can get them used to the idea that doing work for my class is studying, then I can get them to slow down, take it more seriously, and there's better retention of the information. I let my students know that these are tools. I'm giving them these assignments because they serve a purpose, because I believe that they will help them master the material, because I want them to practice certain skills. And I feel like because they understand this, they're more willing to invest time, they're more willing to think about the material and engage with it on a regular basis. In effect, all this, it gives my students ownership of the educational process. They're the ones who are learning. I'm providing the help and resources, but ultimately they're the ones who are learning the material, and by using digital resources and these sorts of regular assessments, they can see every step of the way how their learning is progressing. And they know I can see it as well, so that if there's an issue, they can come in and talk to me and we can do some debugging and figure things out. For learning curve, for these adaptive quizzes, which I know are in a lot of digital products, here are some of my best practices. I assign quizzes so that they're due before class. Some of my students say, well, we haven't covered the material, Mr. White. Why is the quiz due? Well, first off, they're low-stakes assessments, and they're designed to help students prepare for class. I tell them, at least you will have seen the material. I would love it if all my students would take detailed notes on every chapter before they come to class, but I know that's not realistic for a lot of my students. So in a way, they get access to the material, they're able to see the material, and so when they get to class, they have a better idea of what we're going to be talking about and how we're going to be talking about things. It's a very low-stakes assessment. It's a completion grade. All they have to do is finish it. And so whether they get a question right or get a question wrong, as long as they keep proceeding, they will finish the assessment, they'll get their points in my class, and they will be better prepared for the types of things we're going to talk about in lecture. The other thing I like that you can see in this lower graphic, it provides a snapshot for each class. I can see how my class is doing in different topic areas, and not only just individual students. What this helps me do is it allows me to tailor my lectures. It allows me to tailor my class for that class. If I have students that are having trouble, I see overall the class is not getting theories of dreaming. Well, maybe I can spend more time in class. And the thing I like about this is actionable data. I can do something with it. By having my students do these assignments before class, I have enough time to take some notes and change my lecture around so I'm better able to assist my students in learning. It also lets me assess problem areas at course level in this way. It also student level. I can have a student come in and I can bring up their data. And I can see what they understand and what they don't understand. And I can use this to help them build a customized study plan and explain to them, if you work on the things that you don't understand, that'll help you gain mastery. And you should definitely review the things you do understand, but this way we're using your time efficiently. We're focusing in on your problem areas and helping correct those, and we're not spending all this time simply reviewing content you already know. One of the things I like about this particular product, and you see it in a lot of other products as well, is for each of the individual items, it gives students options for additional work. Now, these are all ungraded, but if a student goes in and they didn't do well on understanding sleep in general, there are some activities that points them to different parts in the ebook where they can learn. So now that they know I'm having problems with this area, they know exactly where to look to help remedy these problems and build their own mastery. Now I want to share with you some of my best practices overall for how I set up my course in these digital resources and what I find works really well. I move assignments to the top of the chapter for better visibility. Do I want students to go in and look at the ebook and look at other things that I have not assigned? Maybe they're not worth points that will help them along with mastery? Absolutely, but by putting them at the top, I make it very easy for them to get access to it, and what I find is once they're comfortable accessing it, then they'll go play around and dig deeper. Big thing here, I make all my assignments due before class. That gives me enough time to look at the data so I can take notes and see what's going on. It allows me to better prepare for class. It also enables me to discuss the assignments in class. If I see students did particularly poorly on a particular question on the assignment, I can address it that day in class and have a discussion with them. So they know I'm constantly looking at this material and constantly looking at the data, and I'm working to give them a better educational experience. The other thing I do is I spread out assignments. I give them a little at a time. I understand why some professors would want to put everything at the end. The idea being students should space things out, but a lot of times they don't know, they haven't practiced the skill set, and I want to help them build it. So by spacing things out, I'm keeping students accessing the material. They're not spending a day for studying for my class. They've got to go in and they've got to constantly look at what the homework is, and they've got to engage in some part of the material that we're covering in class. Also, from the domain of memory in psychology research, we know that spaced practice enhances memory for material. Sitting down and spending 6 hours studying a chapter is very inefficient. If I can teach my students to study in little chunks, their memory retention will be better, plus hopefully I can show them this can generalize to other classes and help them build good study skills in general, whether they're using digital resources or not. A little note about traditional versus online organization, because a lot of people use digital resources to help scaffold their online classes. In terms of quality matters and best practices, you should, if you're doing an online class, you should keep the assessments where they are so they're tied in with the chapter. If you're doing a face-to-face class or blended class, I'd recommend pulling them up to the top. One of the nice things about using digital resources in an online environment is it can help meet quality standards. Each assessment is aligned with a learning objective, so it's very, very, very easy for Quality Matters standards to match those assessments up with the learning objectives they cover. The other thing that's nice about it, if you have all of your colleagues in your department, your unit, working in a digital resource, you might find one way to assess one of the SLOs on your assessment plan could be a resource digitally. This allows you to collect an awful lot of data. First of all, the assignment is standardized, you collect data, and then compiling the data for reporting is very, very, very easy. So for especially SLOs that involve things like identify, things you can use a multiple choice test for, digital resources might be a great way to get lots of data for SLOs, especially if you're working in an environment where you've got full-timers and you've got a lot of part-timers. I teach a 2-year, we have a lot of part-timers. So that means everyone has access to the material and everyone is doing things the same way. It's very good for collecting data. I just want to say thank you for Macmillan Learning, for all you guys attending, and those of you who are listening in later, what we're going to do now is put it up for a little bit of Q&A, and hopefully we can address some of your questions and concerns.
Thank you so much, Ben. We intentionally keep this on the short side because it's sort of modeled on TED Talks. We want to keep this digestible and useful, and hopefully you guys found something that you can use. And we devote the next 10 or so minutes, depending on how many questions you guys have, to questions, and we will address them via the webinar. I do have one question that has come in. I've actually had two questions. The first one appears to be, what is learning curve? And I think a lot of the folks on this probably know what learning curve is. For those of you who do, I apologize. I'll keep this brief, but I just want to show Ben referenced learning curve as the quizzing vehicle he uses for before class. This is learning curve. I'm previewing it as a student. It's built into each of the Launchpads from Macmillan. It's a formative, adaptive quiz. The goal is for the students to fill this bar. As they answer these questions, if they get it wrong, they will get feedback on why they got it wrong. If they get it right, they will get points. The points they can get, if you watch up here, go down each wrong answer.
I don't see your screen.
I'm not sharing, am I? Okay.
Nope.
Best practices are we share. Thank you. Okay. This is learning curve, and we'll go to the next question by showing answer. So it's a formative adaptive quiz where this bar here is meant to be filled. The value of the questions varies. So this one's worth 15 points. If I start getting questions right, I'm going to get harder questions that are worth more points. If I get questions wrong, they tell me it's wrong. They also give me feedback. To get a grade on this, now I got that on the second point, so I got 5. The second guess, I got 5 points. To get a grade on learning curve, you simply have to complete it. That's why it's a good or an effective pre-class resource. Students can't get enough. They either finish it or they don't finish it. They just need to devote the time to be able to finish it. If they don't know the answer to the question, there's a couple things they can do. They can open up the ebook. The ebook opens to the exact section where they'll find that answer. They can also take a hint. The hint will reduce the number of points they can earn, but it does guide them in the right direction. Also, if they don't know, they can ask to see the answer, and they may get that question or a similar question later. There's a tracking of this. Each of the topics are tracked for the students to tell them how they're doing in each of the areas. They're also tracked for the instructor on the aggregate, so you know where your students might be struggling. The tracking is also used so that at the halfway point, this becomes adaptive. They get more questions from where they're performing not as well. So hopefully that was helpful and relatively brief for folks that are wondering what learning curve is. We've got another question, and this one appears to be for Ben. What percentage of total points are your per class quizzes?
My quizzes? Well, let me answer it this way. For my general psych class, approximately 45% of my points come from assessments in Launchpad. I do learning curve quizzes, I do data visualization activities, I do a psych sim, and then I do chapter quizzes. For my social psychology class, I make those suckers right, and so 25% of my class is dedicated to learning curve quizzes and chapter quizzes.
Thank you. We have another question. I have access to Launchpad for, I think, an environmental science text, and this is about student purchase. Do they need to purchase access separately, or is it part of the textbook purchase? It can be part of the textbook purchase. It is $5 to add on to a textbook purchase. They can also purchase it separately. We find about half of them do. Because Launchpad includes the entire ebook, and we're actually upgrading the ebook to be more accessible and mobile. That's going to be available in new Launchpads. But bottom line, a lot of students just purchase Launchpad because it is about half the price of a new book, and they're comfortable with just the ebook. There's a 17-day free trial access period, so any student can jump on, register, be enrolled in Launchpad and in the class, and have that 17-day free access to figure out if this is right for them or if they need a printed text. So thank you for that question, and that is hopefully, that explains how it works. next question. Sounds like your methods are tailored for traditional higher education settings. What about professional continuing educational settings? How would I learn more about this if this is the case?
I think you can, I think the methodology, sort of the ideas and best practices are pretty much the same because they're based off of psychological principles, things we know from research in memory. Specifically for continuing education, I would think about doing it the same, although with an older population, you might find they have better time management and study skills, so perhaps you don't need to set it up quite the way I have. Maybe setting it up in bigger bundles would be better. It really kind of depends on your population.
Someone asked if the slides will be available. Yes, we're actually recording this and we're going to make it available to everyone via our community, which is open free access. We'll send an email with the link out. Another question that looks like it's for you, Ben. Have you seen improved class performance as a result of using online tools?
I have, and even I think there's a lot of power in it, but even more so once I started explaining to my students why they have to do it. They do take it more seriously, and they use it as, they see it as providing feedback on how they're doing, so they know, and so when they come in and meet with me, we can address problem areas. I do have, anecdotally, I do have a student who, she got a D on her first exam last semester in my general psychology class. She came in, I showed her how to use these digital resources and do a personalized study plan, and showed her how she can study more effectively. And the next test, she got the 20-point improvement. She got Bs. She got Bs for the rest of the semester. I mean, she brought her grades up. She also told me that she'd applied what we had talked about in my class to her other classes, and she had brought her grades up in those classes as well.
Thank you, Ben. We also have some case studies and white papers on our sites, but more importantly, I believe, we've recently expanded our learning science group, and they're taking a look at every digital product we have and trying to systematically research how they're working, trying to figure out what the benefit is, how they can measure it, ideally in a publishable way, but we're really taking a more empirical approach to looking at how every one of our products is performing. And we hope that in the coming, let's be honest, years, because this kind of research doesn't take a short time, we'll be able to provide some evidence or at least a look into how these things are performing in a more empirical way. Someone has asked what kind of resources are available for writing, not grammar. Well, the learning curve is available, but it does tend towards the grammar, and you can't really teach writing through an adaptive quiz. We have something called Writer's Help that is a tool that allows an instructor to set up rubrics, set up comments, do peer collaboration, things like that. We also have a tool called Writer's Help. When we send the follow-up to this, if you're interested in learning more about that or getting access, simply reply to me or reply to the email you got from me, and I'll make sure that you get access to those tools for writing. Here's an interesting question. How does Launchpad prevent over-collaboration among students? By over-collaboration, which is in quotes, I think we're talking about like cribbing, that kind of thing. It doesn't per se. There is a function in Launchpad where the students have to enter a code to take a high-stakes assessment, so they can go to a proctoring site or go somewhere and have to enter a code to take a timed assessment. So if that is an important piece, if you're concerned about, if it's an online course and you're concerned about students, reading the book or collaborating with one another, that is available. So it's passcode locked assessment option that you can give. It does usually require a proctoring center, which is actually a pretty common thing in most hybrid and online classes these days, because it's really the only way that you can ensure that that student taking it, they're not looking at their phone, they're not looking at their book unless you want them to. In terms of other ways, it's actually more to facilitate collaboration. You can make groups in Launchpad. On something like Learning Curve, I don't think most people would mind if the students collaborated. It means they're doing the work. It means they're getting together and actually doing some work. As Ben had mentioned, ideally in a spaced manner. In other words, instead of having, you know, at the midterm, everything's due with the first midterm or the first major assessment, having assignments due every week, perhaps even before class. So they're spacing and regularly visiting the material. And if they work together in that situation, again, the adaptive quiz is you complete it, you know, it's not A, B, C, D, then most people would be okay with that. There are more summative quizzes, and you can time them, you can randomize them, you can take pools of questions, so every student gets similar questions, but not the exact same questions. You can change up the order of the questions. You can change up the order of the distractors. So there are some built-in tools for higher stakes assessment, including that one I mentioned at the beginning, the passcode protection. Hopefully that answers your question. Do you connect to Canvas? Yes, we do. Ben, I believe you, is it Canvas that you're using?
D2L.
Remind me, please.
D2L.
D2L, okay. So, yes, we integrate with Desire to Learn, which may or may not be called Brightspace now, Canvas, Moodle, and Blackboard. We're working on Sakai. There's also some integration with eCollege. University of Phoenix had needed that at one point, but now anyone that's, I don't think it's that common anymore, but it does exist. The integration means that you have single sign-on, Gradebook Sync. And in the case of Launchpad, it's actually deep asset integration. In other words, the students see exactly what you're assigning inside the LMS. That's what all those things are called, learning management system. So the deep integration takes a little work to set up, but it actually ends up in a better end product for the students. At least that is what most of our users, a vast majority of our users have felt. Let me check to make sure we don't have any other questions here. I'm trying to check QA. Oh, another question came in. This one's for you, Ben. Do you have any rule about using the laptop in your classes?
I generally don't mind use of a laptop in classes, but when it does come up at the beginning of the semester and the student raises their hand, I often talk about some data we have from in psychology about how note-taking, taking stuff by hand, while it is slower, it does lead to better long-term retention than laptops. But I generally don't have a problem with it as long as they're using their laptops for note-taking and not for any other purpose.
Okay, I'm trying to check
one of the other advantages
here too.
One of the other advantages to having assessments due before class is I don't have students trying to do homework in class.
Another question about purchase. Can students purchase Launchpad access without the ebook in cases where textbooks are also available as ebooks? That through a custom setup, yes, they can. We do have a handful of Launchpad products that are available as what we call Launchpad Solo, but that's not the norm. Those are sort of exceptions. We have done that as custom products for folks. We are looking at the future of offering assessment both with the book and without the book. We're trying to figure that out. We also happen to own the Sapling system. Macmillan owns Sapling. It's still branded Sapling. And that is very much a standalone, for the most part, a standalone homework that can also be paired with an ebook, but it's available in both ways. So we kind of have two major systems, both with several 100,000 students in them every term. One of them does work that way. It's more STEM-oriented. It's called Sapling. Launchpad generally doesn't unless we go through custom. But we are reevaluating how we do that as we go, because we realize that OpenStax and open education resources are becoming a bigger and bigger factor in this market, and we want to be able to provide people options. I think that might be it. Let me just double check chat again and double check QA, which I'm actually having a little trouble getting to. I think they might actually mirror each other. Now that would be a change in WebEx. That is all for today. Thank you all so much for your time and your attention. We will be sending out the recording. If you do want access to any product, I guess I'll show this to you really quickly. If you want access to any of our products, this is what Launchpad is, by the way. Go here. Go to launchpadworks.com. You can request, or you can just email me. You all have an email from me. The easier way for you guys is probably just to email me back and tell me. But you can find out more at launchpadworks.com. There's short videos, there's testimonials, there's product information. And thank you again. Have a wonderful day, and we will be running these webinars throughout the semester. We hope to see many of you at a future one. Take care.